Welcome to Depth of Field, a panel discussion show from around the lens on topics of photography, videography, and visual journalism. I'm your host, Bennie Davis, a former Air Force photojournalist and now photographer for the U.S. Marshals. And today we're going to be discussing post-military life with some fellow visual journalists. You can find out more about our show at Around the Lens in general, along with links to all of our social media at aroundthelens.com. And my panelists today are former veterans and friends of mine, Mickey Strand, Brien Aho, and Matthew Callahan. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having us.
All right, boys. Now that we got through that reading of the, let's get into it. I'd like to go around the horn a little with you guys and just, give a brief intro on who you are, where you came from, and what you're doing now. And Matthew, let's start out with you.
Sure thing, Benny. Yep, my name is Matthew Callahan. So I served 9 years in the Marine Corps. Half of that time was spent as a combat correspondent. Did a lot of photo, a lot of video work in the Marine Corps, fell in love with it. And now I'm working for Defense Media Activity as a video production guy for the Navy.
And Brien?
Hello, guys. My name is Brien Aho. I did 20 years in the Navy as a photojournalist, combat photojournalist, and retired after 20 and joined Nikon. Did 8 years with Nikon, and now I'm working for the USDA FSIS as a audiovisual production specialist.
And Mickey, go ahead.
Well, thanks. My name is Mickey Strand, and I worked, retired out of the Navy after 24 years. I served on board ships. I served on board production labs in the shore side, and I worked for a couple of years teaching, and I also got a chance to work with combat camera for about 5-6 years. And now I work for myself.
So tell us what does that entail, Mickey? What are you doing these days?
Well, I have a couple of personal projects that I work on. I have a couple of portraiture assignments that I was given many years ago that kind of turned itself into an entire production. I document the veterans of World War II, the heroes of yesterday and the world's greatest generation, and document their stories and take new portraits of them, quite often with an older portrait of themselves, and I share those. I've had a couple of small shows at places where, like assisted living facilities that they're in, and I actually last year had 96 30 by 44 black and white amazing prints in a museum, and I was actually invited into a museum and had a museum show for about 5 months.
Nice. And we'll get into some of the work and in a little bit on each of you and tell a little bit about our story. Matt, I noticed you're the only non-retiree here. I want to know what your mindset was after 9 years, halfway through the military, what you were thinking and what you were planning on for the future. I mean, the other three of us, we got caught on the web for a little bit longer than you. But what were you thinking, and what was your transition period like?
So I was thinking about my legs and how I'd broken both of them in the service, and how another deployment probably would have made me a useless human being for the remainder of my working days. So that was kind of like a primary driver.
What made you make that decision at 9 years?
Yeah. So a lot of it just kind of had to do with my physical health. I've broken both my legs in the Marine Corps. I snapped my right one in half on my Afghan deployment, like a month into it. And my left one about a year and a half later in a new unit. And so, but yeah, just those considerations, but also, no, I wasn't really done telling the military story, and I knew that there's opportunities outside of active duty that could probably pay me better, and the scope of the work would be a little larger than like a local base commander, and that's exactly what I'm doing now. It's really cool. So those were some of the motivating factors there for sure, but I was just tired, man. I was just tired.
Brien and Mickey, Brien, after talk about being tired, retiring after how many years?
20 years, just for me. Not as long as Mickey, 24, but much like Matt, I was ready to go, and I was enjoying what I was doing, but I saw some light at the end of the tunnel, and fighting my wonderful weight my entire life, I was not ready to deal with any more of that stuff. So I pulled the cord and got out after 20, which I was very excited about. And yeah, I have no regrets getting out, doing my 20, or getting out when I did. It was fun pretty much the whole time through, but it was time.
Mickey, was it time for you, at your 24 years, what was the main deciding factor on you leaving?
Well, to tell you the truth, DINFOS kind of changed my life, but going and being an instructor kind of changed my life. And I've always liked being a visual storyteller. I've always liked the craft. But I liked teaching it better. I really enjoyed that. And I needed one more tour to get to my 20, and was offered to work at the Fleet headquarters of Fleet Imaging in San Diego, and head back to San Diego. So I took the job and kind of built up a classroom downstairs, and took my DINFOS instructor duty and turned to a West Coast digital photo lab operators course, and kind of built it up and helped a couple of friends build that up. And then I, went around to the Pacific Fleet teaching photographers, the field photographers, and that was a lot of fun. And I was kind of ready at 20. I'd kind of prep myself up and be ready to be done. And I, like everybody else, my body wasn't doing as well as it could anymore. And I was thinking that it was come time to be over. I had made, as part of headquarters, I had made one combat deployment from 9/11. I was in country 8 days later. We just yanked everybody who was available and handed a new uniform and headed out the door. So I had a feel for that, but I got offered the opportunity to be the LCPO combat camera for an additional 4 years, and I couldn't not take that job. I mean, it's the pinnacle of a combat photographer in the Navy, is to run that unit and have 51 guys working for you, and then inversely you working for them. Being of service, that job there taught me of being of service to my fellow sailors.
Yeah, my story is, pretty much similar to a culmination of each of yours. I too was struggling with being hurt and damaged goods after essentially breaking my back, in service, and then trying to carry on. And I was very fortunate that I got into a non-deployable assignment with Airman Magazine for, the last 12, 13 years of my career. The last two being with DMA, which Airman Magazine fell under DMA as well, but transferring over to the Defense Information School, as Mickey talked about, to teach for the last 2 years and kind of give it all back, as we say in our community. And was very fortunate to make my 20, and that had always been a goal of mine. I didn't reach all my military goals because of just once injured and you're facing boards and some different things on your injuries, on where you can deploy or what you can do. It becomes a whole different ball game. But it was right around the 14, 15 year mark that I started really thinking about, what's next, right? And I know for a lot of us, especially for the three of us, and I know for many, many more, military, visual journalists, we have a great community around us, not only with, the peers that we work with, but industry as well that work with us and teach us and mentor us, through the DoD workshops and through the Syracuse program and all these other things where we can get guidance. And the writing was on the wall and the change of the industry during my time. I was in that time from switching from film to digital to watching the industry change, and then trying to figure out what's going to happen next. And I'm pretty sure that all three of you came to that crossroads as well on what's going to be next, because prior to our generation, a lot of those folks went directly into newspapers or magazines, as editors or photographers or whatever. And that community had always welcomed us with open arms as, military photographers, stepping into that world. But those things kind of dried up in a sense. I think that you guys would all attest to. Do you have any stories about what you were thinking, what you wanted to do, what your hope was, and how the industry and everything around you kind of made your mind on what you were going to be doing?
Well, I can start first. I I knew fairly early on in my Navy career what my plans were going to be, or what I hope my plans were going to be when I got out. I was lucky, just like you said. We're a close-knit group, and I was introduced to a photographer, Eddie Adams, early on in my career, and I got lucky. He liked me. He invited me up to this workshop to be on the team that staffs the workshop called the Black Team, and I got invited back every year since then. So building those relationships, building that network, and that's huge. Building a network while you're in active duty and reaching out to people out on the outside, which I was very lucky in doing that. I got all the information fed to me. If I had a question, I reached out. And so I knew and pushed hard in my case, Nikon. And I was like, in 10 years, I'm retiring. I'm coming to work for you. And then every year I would see Bill Picala and I'd be like, all right, 8 more years, I'm coming to work for you. And I just like Mickey said, I'm a storyteller. I love, visual storytelling. And working at Nikon is not so much doing that, but I knew based off of friends who worked for Nikon and what Bill Picala was telling me that I'd have opportunity to do my own projects and storytelling. So, we'll get into the Nikon job, but it was unbelievable.
And Mickey, for you,
Well, Benny, to tell you the truth, when I was done, you said, "Did you know you were done?" I kind of knew I was done, but couldn't turn down the opportunity of doing that last 4 years and, giving back to the career field, and I enjoyed the heck out of it. I didn't do a lot of deployment, which was probably not great for my career. But I stayed back and took care of all the guys that were doing all the deployments. I got little jobs here and there and stuff like that. And I really didn't do much shooting over the last couple of years of my life. I did a lot of administration, a lot of taking care of guys, a lot of trying to figure out how to get guys into crazy, nasty, ugly places, and then more better, how to get them out of there. So I enjoyed the heck out of that. So I planned on doing nothing, honestly. I put money away every month from the time I thought I was going to get out until when I got out. They say you put some money aside so that you have that 3 months or 4 months of transition money and stuff like that. Well, I ended up with an extra 4 years out of that, of putting that money aside. So I had enough money not to really have to do anything other than, enjoy myself, enjoy my motorcycle, grow my beard, and just be a vagabond and enjoy life for a couple of months. And I actually had enough money to do it for a couple of years, technically. I didn't last that long, but I told myself I wasn't going to do anything for 6 months, and I didn't pick a camera up for 6 months. I barely got onto, social media and kept in communication. I really needed to make a severance from my military life to my post-military life.
Now, Matthew, you mentioned as well that you knew that you wanted to continue telling, the military story, and then that translated from the Marines and, being the Department of Defense's photographer and videographer of the year. Right after that, you transferred out, and then now, you're telling the Navy story with All Hands. And can you talk a little bit about that transition? How long did it take? What that was like? What your goals were?
Oh man, so it's so sticky. Like I think what's the phrase? Like every plan fails first contact. Yeah, that's kind of like the inevitable stumbling line, I think, for almost every service member when they leave, in whatever way, shape, or form. My lived experience is just like I was at the tail end of a crummy relationship, a marriage. But we had planned for me to, like, spots are opening and closing at DMA on a fairly frequent basis, like every other couple years or so. So, but I just waited a long time. And during the time of my waiting, the grace of my aunts, they let me live with them while I was divorcing my wife. And I worked at Best Buy for about 8 months, 9 months, selling computers to folks. It's actually really good at it. Turns out I'm a really good salesman. I like computers. ironically, I started in the camera department, the camera experience shop at Best Buy. It's actually really cool. But I learned very quickly that like the average consumer base is not attuned to hearing the differences between 4 different cameras of the same brand. It just doesn't make a whole ton of sense. So I got out of cameras like when they kicked me out of cameras to go work at computers, because computers is the moneymaker at Best Buy. And I was like, thank God, because explaining cameras to folks who don't know cameras all day is really weird. But yeah, I just kind of stuck at it. And what ended up happening was the jobs eventually opened up, right? So I'm an audiovisual production specialist. It's a GS12 spot. I ended up just we had to like fight the government, and by we I mean my current girlfriend and I. She was a technical writer back in her day before she made herself into a cloud architect. So she's really good at the writing thing. But anyway, they basically had what was it? They rejected my application because I didn't have the word podcast in it. It was a USA Jobs thing. So if there's a point to anything I'm saying right now, it's that it's long. It can be hard, extremely boring, painful, little miserable. And I think, yeah, that's kind of the best way I can describe it. It's worth persevering through. And then again, it depends on what situation you find yourself in, but it's tough. It's weird. Fucking super weird. Excuse my language. But yeah.
It's funny. I'm to piggyback on that, Matt. Brien and I were actually talking a little bit earlier today about the fact that tuning your application in USA Jobs, if you want to stay in the government and you want to, continue to be of service in the government, and if you enjoy the, the camaraderie of that fellowship and stuff like that, yeah, writing a resume and having a tuned resume for every specific, I mean, I didn't learn that until well after I got out of the military, is that I needed to have a CV to work on production jobs. I didn't know what a CV was, and I needed to have a resume that said I could do this, and then I could do this, and then I could do this, and I also could do this, but I needed 5 different resumes. I didn't need one resume that said I could do everything. I needed a resume that said I could be a still photographer, a production photographer, a portrait photographer, an instructor. I spent most of my, ending days in the Navy as an instructor, and that was what most of my resume was based off of. So, right. I feel you. I know Brien feels you on that one.
Right. I mean, when I was getting out of the Navy, I put in applications like through USA Jobs. I think about 5 USA Jobs applications, and I was still a little hesitant about what type of work in the GS world, because I wasn't familiar with it. I mean, I asked questions, and I'm going to get to basically that's the big key, is asking questions. So I looked at all the USA Jobs, and I just picked a few that I knew familiar with. I taught at DIMFO, so I was like, that's where I'm going to apply to. But I also applied at other jobs like Nikon, Washington Times, and a few other jobs. And just like Mickey was talking about, I had gotten advice. They said when you read the announcement, curtail your resume, add some of those words from the announcement into your resume. And so I ended up, I was telling Mickey earlier today, I ended up having 2 GSA jobs accept me at the same time. And I had to choose one because at the time Nikon actually hired internally, and I didn't get that job right away. So I worked at DIMFOS for 2.5 months before Nikon was like, well, we do want you to come back. So.
No, I understand those that process very well myself. I can tell you that for me, it was about that time where you're starting to get worried about what's next, right? So you're on your last couple tours or whatever, the finish line's around the corner, and you're looking around and trying to plan out, what are you going to do? How am I going to care for my family? What's going to be next? The retirement check's great. The benefits are great. It's not going to take care of everything. And I didn't have a little nest egg or anything else saved up as to take care of myself as much as I would have loved to, right? Um, I looked around at, some of our friends at, Mary Calvert at the Washington Times, and they're getting pink slips. I'm 15 years in, and I always thought, well, maybe I'll join a newspaper. Maybe I'll pick up an editing gig here because a couple of my mentors had done the same. Maybe I'll go to Nikon because a couple of my mentors, had done the same. I'd watched Brian done it, Mark Kenthoffen, a couple of our friends make that transition, and man, it was scary. It really was, because at that time, mid 2000s, you're watching, or I think it was like 2008 or 9, when I was watching everybody else in the industry, just everything was folding. It seemed like it was folding, and it looked very bleak for us, in a sense of what we can do on the outside. Are we going to be out there with the rest of the freelancers at a much older age than a lot of freelancers, starting brand new, or what was going to be the outcome? And that's when I made the decision that I think that the GS, the government service work, was probably the best way to stay attuned to that community, and then also continue carrying a camera for the military, and telling the stories that we love to tell. And I too, I took a writing course on how to write for USA Jobs and how to write resumes, and I was very fortunate right out of Denfos. I put in for a job right when I retired. I put in for a job 2 months later. I was picked up to be a Denfos instructor. But there was something that I learned that is key for government service if you're going into government service, and that is your first step into government service is the most important. It's where you land and how you're going to go forward, right? So I was so nervous about what was going to happen next, and that 6 months, because there's a 6-month post waiting period now for military members that get out before they can enter government service work. But I was worried in that time frame, and I enjoyed my little bit of retirement for a couple of months, but of transitioning back into government service. But I was very fortunate, and got right back into Denfos. It was not at the rate that I wanted to be at or the grade that I wanted to be at, but it was a job, and it was something I loved to do, and that kind of outweighed everything. And been fortunate since to be able to get in the last 4 years of being out of the military to have received 2 different promotions, and to land where I am now with the U.S. Marshals has been fantastic. But you guys have all touched on something that's very important when you're talking about USA Jobs, because I know even a lot of our friends out there, I know Pulitzer Prize winning photographers that have sent me resumes while I was a government service photographer, and asking how can I get in, because they wanted that job security. And that's something that I knew that's what was going to be the case for me. And I can see with a couple of you as well, was there's so much job security in federal work and doing what we do, because we were all good at it at that point. And we were wanted back into the service, but that was the big factor, was it all came down to security. Now thinking about this, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, can I just
Please
jump off that for a second? I think it's like what you just said is really important too, and something for folks like transitioning out. And me, as someone who's pretty fresh, I got out in 2018, and I got my job at All Hands my first day of work was February 2019, actually a month before pandemic really started to kick off. Super fortunate, but generally speaking, I mean, I know you said it, Benny, yourself, like other folks said it, like, hey, we want you at DMA, like, we want you there. And I know I have like the skill set. I know I had the skill set to work at DMA. Despite all those things, like there's still something important to note is just that, like, Defense Logistics Agency does not care. No one cares. And obviously, like, they have to play that. They have to, like, there's a rule book they have to follow. But yeah, it's even if like you have just the littlest little technical mistake will ruin your chances of your resume being seen by the person that's looking to hire somebody on their staff. And again, for me, it was literally, I called DLA and I was like, hey, why were these applications rejected? There's more than enough experience on here. This doesn't make any sense. Well, you didn't have the word podcast in your resume. And so that told me one thing right up front. Like, that told me something immediately, that's that, you know, and it's just kind of like it's like a open secret, if you will. Technically speaking, Defense Logistics Agency and USA Jobs is not allowed to just basically look at the bullet points of the job posting and only go off of that and try to find that in your resume. But that's precisely what they did with mine, and that's what they probably do with thousands of resumes every week. So we fought them on it. You know, fire email back like, hey, no, actually, that's not what's going to happen here. This doesn't make any sense. And, you know, we constructed an argument, and like a legal argument, basically threatening them. And they ended up shooting themselves in the foot even further, because one of the representatives got back to me and was like, well, actually, we didn't count any of your military service because it's not really comparable to that of a GS-12. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. So my girlfriend and I, we go to the OPM guidelines and look up all the rules. And very explicitly, it states multiple times, military rank cannot be equated to experience. So we just played that game with them, you know, and there's a lesson in that too. And it's just, it's a bureaucracy. You're going to have to get friction. There's going to be friction with it. You're going to have to get close to it. You're going to have to poke it sometimes if you want to get what you want out of it. That's the lesson there, and that's what we did. So anyway, sorry.
No,
just to bounce for 2 seconds, just so everybody remembers that the GS world is not everything and anything and all of everything that is post-military career. I mean, and not to toot my own horn, but I never know, honestly, from month to month, I never know where I'm going to be, what I'm going to be doing, who I'm going to be doing it for. And honestly, if you want to work on the outside, you can work. You need to work. You need to have a pull sheet. You need to have, you know, multiple, like we said, you need to have multiple resumes. You need to have multiple photographic resumes. Somebody calls you up and says, hey, can you do some product photography? You need to have a junk folder full of product stuff that you have lit and that you have flagged and that you have screened and scrimmed and done all those types of things. And if you haven't done those things and you want to work in that world, then you need to go out and shoot some of those things, whether it's coffee cups at home or figurines, you know, and you want to, you know, play around with those and get really good at those. You know, find a project that entertains your brain for a while. You know, my portrait project was that. It was something to entertain my brain, and something that I wanted to work on my talent at. And it turned into, you know, a million times more than I ever thought this little self-assignment was going to turn into. And now, like I said, I get a phone call from a production studio that I work with up north, and I put in 4 to 6 days a month with the production studio. I don't have to deal with the clients other than be polite to them. I don't have to go out and find them. I get hired to come in and take pictures because I've proven that I can come in and take pictures. You know, and it may just be come in, shut up, do the job, crank out some production. And sometimes production photography is long and hard hours, but it pays the bills so that you can afford to do the other fun stuff that you want to do, like my portrait project. So I have money to do it.
Right. And just like to jump on that is, you know, the GS world is nice. It's a security blanket. I get it. I wasn't part of it for 8 years, but now that I am, I mean, I understand. And it's nice to have that security blanket. But just like Mickey was saying, you're going to find work. You're going to be able to get work. And when I was an instructor at Dinfos, and the instruction that you received at Dinfos, I'm sure was the same. They're giving you the tools. And, you know, I you know, happened to do 20 years and was proactive in reaching out and trying to learn and pick people's brains, just so I knew I was, you know, at the 20th year, I was planning on getting out. So be proactive. You've got the tools given to you by the military. So I didn't sweat it. You know, that's what we were talking about is, you know, how did you feel when your time was coming up? I had no issues. I was like, I'm ready. I know I got military retirement pay coming in. And I, like I said, I applied for USA Jobs and got 2 of them right away. So I had I was literally retired on a Friday the 31st and was working at Dinfo's the next Monday. So I haven't had any time off. But you're going to find work. Don't sweat it.
No, I think that's definitely a good point. And everybody's, story and transition is of course different. You're right. The GS community and what we do, going back into, for some of us, I went right back to where I was working, essentially at Dinfo's, and then right back over to Airman Magazine as DMA transferred me back to my old position. And I was, photographing and writing again for Airman Magazine, which I did for so many years. Was very fortunate. But Brien, you're absolutely right. We were given a skill set, right? That you can absolutely just, you bust your ass and you can do it. You can make it. We've seen many of people do it. We've got friends of ours, fellow veterans, we'll say like an Aaron Ansaroff or somebody that just, they find projects and they put their mind to it and they create and make beautiful work. There's so many success stories of folks that have gotten out of the military and gone on to, I've got a friend, a couple of us have a friend that's now shooting for the New York Times, or we have, folks that are running their own, photo studios, or doing, creative, more on the art side of the house. There's folks that are photo editing that are out there that are still inside of the visual world, and absolutely love it.
And podcasting, I mean, JT, is known for his brilliance on the still side, but now he's recreated himself and is doing this podcast that's just phenomenal. And he got a lot of that skills while he was in active duty. I mean, so you're going to be all right.
Just go and do it. Yeah, just go and do it. I mean, Drew Geraci. I mean, come on, the guy, has written the book when it comes to stop motion or time lapse photography. I mean, he's the guy that kind of, companies are going to and saying, I need this. I mean, he currently right now is on a major motion picture job right now inside of COVID, and he's still working, so if you work and you get decent at what you do and you just keep grinding, opportunities will come.
Absolutely believe that. You're right. Drew's doing fantastic work with District 7 Media, and former Navy photojournalist, went through the Syracuse program like a few of us, and doing fantastic work just on time lapse. He found, we always heard, and a lot of folks would tell us in the photo world, find your niche, right? Find what you love to do, whatever it is. So we've got veterans out there that are doing it. I mean, Drew shot, for most of you will know, like the House of Cards, intro for that Netflix series. And then now again, he's out on doing motion pictures and doing intros for movies and doing plates and stuff, down in South America.
And House of Cards, actually, he got the job because he was out practicing and he was getting good at, and he was publishing that work and putting it out there so people could see it. And then the people at House of Cards called him up and said, hey, this is really cool. We want to license this work. And the guy figured out how to license work that he was, creating, and how to, in essence, get hired to build license catalogs.
Yeah, true. And doing fantastic stuff. Speaking of side projects, we've got somebody on this panel here that started a side project that they love, and has gathered some acclaim across social media on the work for Galactic Warfighters there, Matt. Can you tell us a little bit about your project and show us some of the work that you've done and what inspired you?
Yeah, sure. So that project, that started in Dinfo's, actually. And we were going through the photo side of the course, the public affairs course, and said a couple. Oh, actually, it was a buddy of mine who had a few 6-inch stormtrooper figures, and we had a little assignment one day, and I took the figure out and photographed it. We just sorry, I got a text. It was a good joke, but yeah, it was just a means of again, it was just like, I think, like where's he at? Mickey had said earlier, just as a means of kind of experimenting and practicing, just working the camera, working the mechanics of it, and just kind of learning how shutter speed, aperture, all that really kind of works in conjunction with itself. The photos turned out pretty cool. I really liked them. Everyone else kind of did too. It was really neat. So started diving into that, and that was 2013. I still photograph toys, and I'll bring this all up for you now. Let's share my screen. Let's see. Let's go to here. This is some of the more recent stuff. You guys see that all right? Everyone see that okay? I'm just on my Instagram right now, but let's go to the website. I don't have any on this machine. My machine's just not good enough to support a mirrorless camera as a webcam, so you know, we're on the slightly faster, but one that has none of my stuff on it, so we have to go with the web. But yeah, so the whole concept and idea behind the project and like where it kind of found its visual voice for me was it's just like a boots on the ground perspective, like war correspondence perspective of like the Star Wars universe, with like appropriate captioning, like, you know, just basic dry AP style, you know, these people do this here on this day, this happens, you know, the same way that we were learning how to write captions, write stories like hard news stories, and just kind of like use strategic communication, journalism, all these elements together. I kind of was able to synthesize into this project and have some fun with it. But it's like a love letter to the military and to my love of Star Wars. I always knew I was going to be in the military. I didn't know I was going to be a Marine, but you know, things happen. I wanted to be a fighter pilot because, you know, like everyone else, I saw Top Gun when I was really little, and it was my first true love in cinema. But yeah, so these are all 12-inch figures. It's not going to look as grand here. And we've been getting into some other stuff with portraits. I got a couple of projects I'm working right now. Let's zoom into this a bit. We can do that. There we go. Whoop. But we have some fun with it. I don't really know where it's.
Letter to the military.
Yeah.
And now, have you? I noticed on a couple of the first few, you kind of recreated some military scenarios, correct?
I have, yeah. One second, let me.
Well, I'll ask you, Matt. I had heard a rumor that some of these originally started as kind of recreations of some of the images that you had captured originally out in Fallujah or boots on ground somewhere.
Yes and no. So the narratives got kind of mixed up. I guess like I need to go to like an actual like brand strategy class or something, because it kind of, I mean, well, that's kind of the weird thing about having a personal project that kind of goes like, you know, gets some attention, is people infer what they want from the work that you make, and they always will. And you will never be able to tell somebody what your work means to them. So fun fact, don't ever forget it. That's how it works most of the time, unfortunately and fortunately. It's a gift and a curse kind of situation. But yeah, there are, you know, recreations. A lot of my stuff is kind of recreations of my own imagery, whether it was in training or forward deployed. No combat stuff really. But Syria, I was in Syria. I documented some artillery folks doing their thing, trying to find. So like, here's a fun one. This is just a mortar shot, right? This is a recreation of fellow Marines image that she made. Elise McKelvey, fantastic artist all around, super good, working in multiple mediums. This is her original photograph. You know, obviously we have to play with perspective and stuff a little bit. I don't have the real estate to have like a full-blown studio and kind of photograph at like my waist level, so I'm not constantly like bending over and stuff, but we're figuring it out as we go. That was like kind of one. There's the one you're probably more familiar with is here. We'll find it down here somewhere.
Well, tell me, Matthew, at what point in your military career did you fall in love with what we do?
It's not that I'm in love with what we do or that I'm in love with the military. It's just, it's hard work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot most of the time. And you can all attest to this. It's, you know, it's 90 minutes of sitting around and doing nothing and 10 seconds of the most breathless, exhausting stuff you've ever done in your life. That's kind of how it works. But as we kind of like, as I progressed in my career, as I, you know, as the years went by and I went from being an infantryman over to a correspondent, some of my favorite things to photograph were, you know, just people, like Marines in vulnerable in positions of vulnerability mostly. And, you know, that's important because it kind of, you know, it takes them out of the two-dimensional space, and it makes them a real human. And I kind of figured that out, and that's what I fell in love with. I fell in love with kind of telling those little stories. And just, you know, like on an image like this, you know, this kind of became my low-key mission in the military, is to try to just get close and just like get quiet stuff like this. Because most of the audience that we're speaking to views the military and the Marine Corps or whatever as this weird monolithic, you get an M16 and you get an M16 and everyone goes to Afghanistan to get blown up for oil. And it's like a little more nuanced than that. Everybody has their own motivations, aspirations, dreams. And left and right lateral limits. And, you know, for a lot of Marines, these folks here, like, their left and right lateral limits for what they could tolerate was extremely wide. And just being able to be there to capture that on multiple occasions, you know, just getting to do that as like my day job. Like, hey, go to the field for a week and, you know, just cover these folks just doing what they do, just being soaking wet and disgusting and doing some hardcore training so that one day, maybe, possibly, they might be able to use it. It's kind of neat.
Now, Mickey and Brian, and thanks, Matt, for sharing, you know, that with us. At what point in your career did you know, because I mean, a lot of people on the outside world, they don't understand that for a lot of us, we weren't guaranteed this job. This wasn't something that we came in to do. For a lot of folks that are visual journalists for the military or public affairs, for that matter now, or mass communicators, if you will, they're handed this job. And some of us will say that they're very fortunate, but there's a lot of them that just don't get it and it doesn't work for them. It takes a special breed, as we all know, in this career field. But at what point did you know this is what you were supposed to be doing or what you wanted to do, obviously? And what point was that in your career?
Well, for me, I joined the Navy as an undesignated airman and was headed to the flight deck to learn to chalk and chain planes and do stuff like that. I was really fortunate. I think destiny was set some you know, boundaries in front of me and some walls for me to bounce off of. And when I first got to the aircraft carrier, there was another guy in the indoctrination grouping division who was a photographer and who had just been through A school and was working in the photo lab. And we happened to be on the same duty section, and we hung out a little bit. And he brought me down to the photo lab, and I had all through high school, and my dad was an amateur photographer. We had a little dark room in the basement. You know, it was Wisconsin. We had a gun shed that we turned into, you know, a dark room because it was a room that closed and locked and was, you know, secure type of deal. So, you know, I was sink lining black and white papers through an Omega, you know, at 13, 14, 15, and never really thought that it was going to be a life for me. But I, you know, on a duty night ended up down there, and I thought this was so cool because they had machines that you could put paper in that you had exposed in an enlarger, and it would come out dry with the print on the other end in 50 some odd seconds. And this was the most amazing thing I had ever seen, because I had sink lined and been hand doing stuff my entire life through high school and, you know, working with my dad and stuff like that, and, you know, playing around with my cameras. So, so I kind of hung out. I, you know, would print regular production jobs for them. And one day the division officer came out and said, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm, you know, it's a reenlistment, sir." And "Oh, you're working on my work?" "Yes, sir. I just was helping, you know, this guy, you know, get the job done so we could go out and have a cigarette or, you know, whatever it was." And he's like, "Well, show me what you're doing." And I brought out the work, and he's like, "Well, where's your waist?" And I showed him how much waist I had. And he's like, well, you know how to do this, don't you? I was like, well, yes, sir. He's like, well, why didn't you come in the Navy as a photographer? Well, I couldn't do and wasn't available. And I needed to get out of the, my life in Wisconsin, et cetera. And I was fortunate that he went to bat for me. Air Department said no, that they weren't going to lose me. I was going to be a guy with boots on the deck. And he went up to the admin officer and came down to me and handed me a piece of paper that was an interdepartmental transfer and had this huge green line across it. And we all know in the Navy, green means XO, and it had been and had XO's signature on it. And no, I was going to be a photographer. And I was really fortunate, so having had a little experience and then being willing to do a little extra work on one of my days off definitely paid and got me in the door. And I eventually was able to strike in and take the PH3 test and start my actual career. But no, I was going to be a deck sailor or, a aviation bosun's mate originally when I joined the Navy. So I worked my butt off to get down into the photo lab, and start my career.
Brien, at what point in your career did you know that this was what you were going to do for the rest of your life?
Well, I was talking to Mickey earlier today, and I have always known I wanted to be a photographer. Ever since my father put a camera in my hand, and when I don't have a camera in my hand, I'm not in a good mood and I'm not a very happy person. So I came in, right as the first Gulf War was starting, and at the recruiters, I was signing the paperwork and stuff just day one, and a camera crew came in and from the news, and they're like, well, why do you want to join the Navy? We're going to war. Are you scared or anything? I was like, no, I'm not scared. And they're like, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a war correspondent. I mean, that's, seeing imagery and war images from past, I was just like, that's what I want to do. There's other reasons why I joined the Navy, but I mean, I knew once I was set on that joining the military, I knew I wanted to be a photographer in the military. So I knew coming in that, I was a photographer before I joined. I knew what I wanted to do. I was in. I made sure that, well, I didn't know anything about the military first off, so I was an undesignated seaman, if anybody knows what that is. And so for 2 years, I was on the deck department doing that stuff. But I did the 5 mod books that the Navy had, and took the test. And still, they would not make me a photographer. And I was getting out. And about a month and a half before I got out, I spoke with an admiral that I happened to work for. And he said, well, let me see what I could do for you. Seaman Aho at the time. And let's just say 2 weeks later, I had orders for A school. And so, throughout my career, I knew I just wanted to expand on my knowledge base. And I've, I can't emphasize this enough, is get mentors. Mark Kettenhoffen helped me. David Tucker helped me. There was, there's just so many. Tom Sperduto was a huge help for me. Then of course my mentor, Chip Mari. I mean, he has always been my guide and led me in the right direction. And so as long as you have those people and you can find those people, and you know what you want, just go for it, ask the questions, and it's going to come to you. So,
yeah, I think I was a fate, as fate would have it, story as well. I remember my first ever thought about being a photographer was, I was thumbing through some baseball cards, and there was this picture of Mark McGuire from the Oakland Athletics, and he was standing there, just this super low perspective, looking up at him, holding a bat. He looks larger than life, and I was like, one day, I want to be the photographer for the baseball cards. Like I thought in my head, young kid, like there was specific photographers that just shot nothing but for baseball cards. And so that's where it all started. But then I put that past me, and when I set to join the Air Force, I didn't know that they had, photographers at all, or that they even existed in the military at that point. And I came in as a occupational therapist. I wanted to go into sports medicine, staying in the sports realm. and it merged with physical therapy while I was in basic training. And the guy said, "I'm sorry, but your job is gone. You have an option to go home or pick another job." And the last, on the bottom of the list, it said, I remember the list. It said, security forces, number one, cop, the things that the Air Force needed. Then it went into services, handing out towels at the gym and, doing that type of thing. And the very bottom, it said still photographer. And I said, wow, still photographer. And he's like, yeah, I guess we have photographers in the Air Force. I was like, I want to do that. And he looked at the list and he goes, that job is 1 in 3,500. So your odds of getting that job is 1 in 3,500. And I was in basic, almost done with basic training. And I said, that's it. If you can't make me a still photographer, I'm getting out. Just send me home, because I had a guaranteed job. And a couple of days later, they were passing out orders, and inside basic training, and said, still photographer, you're headed to Mountain Home, ID. And I was like, oh man, I'm going to Indiana. And they're like, oh, that's Idaho, fool. And two things I didn't know. I didn't know that there was photographers in the Air Force, and I damn sure didn't know that there was any of them in Idaho. And I was off on my way. But it was meeting people throughout my career. As you mentioned, Jeremy Locke, who ended up becoming, my mentor and brother, best friend, that kind of guided me through my career. And it was that sense of community inside the military as military photographers and that visual, just visual journalists in general. That community seemed so unique and so different than anything else I'd experienced in the military. And as photographers, we get to experience everything in the military, which is fantastic. One day I'm an electrician, another day I'm a plumber, the other whatever, because you're out with them. And our community is pretty cool. And the reason we're all here is a sense because of our community. And that's what I think I fell in love with the community almost more than the photography. And then the photography kind of grew from there as I was being, mentored and brought up. So.
And it's definitely, it's a definitely tight knit family. And that's, I call you all my friends and brothers, and everybody's got so much skills out there that, I cannot emphasize enough is just go ask, like, Matt working with those figurines, he's learning lighting and just perspective. It's brilliant, so if I need some lighting stuff, I'm going to go to Matt, and I'm now doing video. If we're going to transition into what we're doing after, I'm now doing video. And I worked at All Hands Magazine, and we had to produce television spots. And so I started diving into Premiere and Final Cut Pro back then, and Avid and things like that. And I didn't have a video background. I would go out with the videographers and shoot my stills and see what they were doing, and then watch them sometimes in the editing room. But I didn't really pay close attention. So I latched on to people who did. And, I got lucky. My best friend is Shane McCoy, and he was brilliant at editing and, as a still photographer, as we all know, and he schooled me. And, so I can't emphasize enough. We're close-knit family, and everybody's got great skills that you can pick. So,
Brian,
and on top of that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Benny.
Action figures, Brian. That's what they're called.
What did I call them?
Matt playing with his figurines.
I mean, they can be whatever you want them to be, baby. It's fine.
Yeah.
All right, Matt.
And it's I want to back on to what both of you guys were saying about the community. Is the community is very, we're very together. We're very useful for each other. We're very, we're always there for each other. I have a charity Christmas portrait thing that I do with the homeless shelter, or the veterans shelter down here in San Diego. And I put a feeler out I thought I was going to do this little project and was going to take 10 or 15, Christmas portraits of these guys who were getting off the street and stopping drugs and this and that. And when I walked in the door and was actually given permission to do this, I found out there were 100 residents, not 15 residents. And I put my feelers out and said, hey, I need help with this. I need people who have got gear. I need people who have got studio gear. I need people who got printers and are willing to come in and help me set this up. And, our community is very big-hearted in, wanting to give back and be of service to their fellow veteran. And we set up 4 production studios and 4 printing labs, and we were shooting a portrait and giving a picture before the veteran walked out the door that day, and emailing them the JPEG so that they could share it with their family and friends. And dude, we shot portraits of people who had said that they hadn't had their picture taken, they'd lived on the street for 8 years or 15 years or whatever and hadn't had a picture taken since their military days, and you ask them, what are you going to do with this picture? And they're like, well, it's the first picture that I actually look like a human being again, and I think I'm going to give it to my mom. And if you can do well by your craft, and definitely do it. But when you're stuck and you need that help, ask. Like Brien and Bennie were both saying, ask, because the people want to do stuff. They just quite often don't know how to start stuff. Everybody wanted. I had 22 volunteers. Not last year because it was COVID, but the year before that, I had 22 volunteers and 4 portrait studios and, 6 editors and hair and makeup. And I mean, it turned into this monster project, all with the first starter was I just wanted to do, some nice portraits for some people who, were getting back on their feet and doing the right thing.
Mickey, why don't you show us a little bit of the portrait work that you've been working on and kind of your project as it's progressed?
Well, the help portrait, let me share a screen here. Let me find one of the, well, here's the 2017. So let me share the screen, my photos, and I'll just bounce through. I think I can turn this.
We can see it well here.
Okay. So we got a bunch of us together, and like I said, we set up 4 portrait studios, and one guy set up to do full lengths. So if somebody wanted to go over and get full lengths, the home, the Veterans Village of San Diego, which is a substance abuse and treatment facility, gets veterans off the street so that they can, get into programs and get help with the VA. And a lot of these guys have never actually applied to the VA, don't know what their benefits are, stuff like that. And they help them get started with that. And so, we set up and I set up a simple headshot type of thing, thinking that these guys could use them for their LinkedIn or for their Facebook profiles or what have you, never realizing exactly how emotional this project would end up actually being. It was Jeremy. I went to a photo conference and heard somebody speak about this, and it's called the Help Portrait Project. It's a national project that they're not even running the project because it just kind of runs itself now. So photographers who want to go out and be of service to a people in their community and shoot portraits for, this family had never had a family portrait done. And he, was just getting off the streets and getting back to, being exposed to his family. And this guy was super happy because he had new teeth. Drugs had let him down the line that, his dental care wasn't the greatest in the world. And he was super happy about the fact that he had new teeth, and we facilitated the opportunity for him to smile and share that smile with the rest of the world, with the people that are special in his life.
That's awesome.
Sometimes it was families, sometimes it was people sharing a moment with their pet or somebody else's pet. This dog got shot like 16 times, I think, that day, because it was just adorable. And I've got a friend of mine, Bruce, that loves to do these really shallow, tight, lovely portraits with, depth of field of a 1.2 lens or something like that. And then I've got other guys that I work in a studio with. I actually share studio space with 4 other photographers, and we share the space. We share a calendar, just a Google calendar, and we sometimes work together and we often work apart, but it's definitely a way to share the rent and not have to deal with, 100% of having your own infrastructure and your space. So again, it was just, go ahead, Ben.
What else are you working on though, Mickey? Like you started with that one project that turned into, to this larger project, but then I know you've also branched out to a couple other different veteran projects as well.
Well, I am, where is my, there's the Beyond the Cut. There's my VPS all. So I photograph veterans of World War II. Again, it was just one of these, it started off as a personal project. It started off as a mentor who said, you know, well, we were working on a shoot and we did some portraiture, and I said, well, I'm not really very good at portraiture. All my portraiture looks the same. It all looks like military portraiture. It all is, you know, this broad 3/4 lighting. It's all, you know, Rembrandt lighting or broad lighting. And he said, well, you know, you should shoot one portrait a month for me then. You might want to find a subject that you're interested in learning about, because I'd like you to interview the guys so that you get to know them, so that you get a little more vested in doing a nice portrait for the person. So I started on bikers. I just, you know, because I thought they were entertaining and that they had a lot of character in their faces and stuff like that. But it turned into veterans, and then it turned into World War II veterans. And I started photographing World War II veterans. I have photographed over 100 World War II veterans. I've interviewed them. Some are lovely, amazing interviews, and some are emotional, tear-jerking. Some of these guys will tell you stories about combat or about losing a brother in a combat situation. And some of them will tell you about coming home. And, you know, these guys came home and they were heroes. This was America's greatest generation. And these guys, you know, went back and started rebuilding our country right away. They, you know, they went to work. They didn't talk about their service. They just got jobs and they rebuilt, you know, the Industrial Revolution. And well, I mean, they rebuilt back in the United States. You know, some of them stayed in. Some of these guys actually did 20 or 24 after being exposed to military life, and they kind of liked it. And some of them only did 2 or 3 years. You know, I've had some that only did a couple of years and don't really feel that they're all that special and all that important. And it's nice to spend a few moments with, you know, a really sweet old lady and tell her that she's important to me, and that her service was important to me and to the thousands of people that I hope will eventually see this picture, you know, and listen to her tell her story about, you know, being in the Corps and about how she was of service. And guys that, you know, maybe are, you know, had some issues in the military and are dealing with the traumatic, you know, parts of their life, and maybe aren't able to communicate that well. And, you know, I've had an opportunity to meet some truly amazing friends. I have laughed an amazing amount of laughs, belly laughs, with some of these guys. I have cried with some of these guys when they tell stories. I have definitely shed a tear. This is Don. He served with the 442nd, which was part of the 100th Battalion, and it was an all Japanese American service battalion. It was completely made. All the service members were Japanese Americans, mostly Hawaiian Japanese Americans, and their officers were white guys. You know, and the people who led them, and he went through Tunisia and went up through Italy and went into France, and he lost his arm in France to a machine gun attack, took his arm off, and he passed away a couple of days ago, and his daughter called me, and it was a very emotional day because Don's a pretty cool dude to sit and talk to, you know. So if you do pick a personal project and it's something where the people of your project are going to be passing away at a very high rate, be ready for some emotional tears and some that's Tiger Lil.
Mickey, what that's great advice that you were giving there. And we talked a little bit about personal projects, and we talked about persevering with what you've been taught and getting out there and you can make something of it. What advice do you have for those that are, you know, getting ready to transition, whether getting ready to retire or have only done, you know, 9 years like Matt? What advice do you give about being a visual journalist transitioning to the outside world?
If you want to still do this, you know, I mean, I was very fortunate. I had my retirement, you know, so I, in essence, have a pension check. So I set myself up so that I could live on my pension check. I mean, I'm married and my wife makes very good money, and we have a very business-like marriage where we have our bills. And so I made sure that my retirement check and whatever else I was bringing in would recover my, you know, operating my photo business. So honestly, I get yourself, it's a business, set it up, figure out what you actually want to do, and then figure out what it costs to do that. I mean, I wrote a business plan for, being able to go out and do these projects. I wrote multiple business plans of what is it going to cost me to have production space? What is it going to cost me to have a studio? What does it cost me to travel to these places? Most of this stuff I do on my own dime. I've been fortunate to have some of the printing taken care of by some donations from different places. Some veterans organizations and things like that have helped me cover some of the printing, but all the expenses of going out and doing this I've done on my own dime. So be prepared to spend money to start with. Now, I'm very fortunate that, again, our community, our group, our fellowship of mass communication specialists or communication visual artists is small and tight. And if you are out there doing work and you are publishing it and you are printing it and you are posting it online, I hate social media, but it is a necessary evil of pushing that stuff out there so people know you're working. So people know that you're actually doing stuff, because I got a phone call and said, hey, do you also do X? And would you be willing to do X? And I was happy to do X because it pays a really good day rate, which allows me to continue to do Y and Z, which are the things I want to do.
And Brien, you talked about too, the importance of that community and the importance of the network that we have. What advice are you going to give to somebody that's getting ready to transition, out? You talked about reaching out and getting mentors. Can you talk a little bit more about how valuable that is?
Yes. So, I mean, we've hit on it before, but and you guys have been hitting on your personal projects, and I've had a few personal projects that I started and I haven't really completed through. It's still just, I got like 5 of them that are just sitting there, but I know. However, once you are determined, you think where you're heading. I just kept asking questions like, how do I, what workshop should I attend? What who should I speak to about looking at my work and giving me good critique, to go into the direction I want, which is, I've been a portrait guy. Even though I love visual storytelling, I love people's faces. I mean, I don't know if you want to see some of my work.
Why don't you share some work with us right now, a little bit of work that you've done through the years and what you love. And then walk us through that. Walk us through your transitions and that advice.
So, well, it's funny because I actually was looking, this is just some of my work, but you were talking about my transition. So when I joined the Navy, I was sent to, the Navy and the military's got tons of machinery, aircrafts and boats and ships, and I didn't concentrate on the people. And the people were the reasons why I came in. Are you seeing my stuff, by the way?
No, you're gonna need to share your screen.
Oh, see, I've been talking.
Here it comes. Here it comes.
I think it's just that slow Texas Wi-Fi.
Yeah, no, it's just slow me. With this first time's doing Zoom. So I shot a lot of aircraft and ships and things like that. And I found a mentor, and his name was Chip Maury. And when I showed him my portfolio, it was all this stuff that you're seeing here, planes and ships and equipment. And he's like, well, where's the people? Aren't the people the ones that make the world go round and drive those ships and fly those planes and things? He said, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you until you show me people. So that's all I did was I switched gears and I started shooting, equipment, but there was people in them, and it just was baby steps. I was nice. Shooting, thank you. This one was actually my first Milfog win.
Oh, that's dope. I love that. For
sports. So, the next year I bring it to Chip and he's like, okay, I see the people, but where are the emotions? Where is that definitive moment and stuff like that? Like I want to see ears, eyes, balls, and teeth and stuff, right? Now, of course, now I'm known for the dolphin shot, but yeah, I got eyes, earballs, and teeth, right? And then he was like, well, I want to see humans. I was like, all right, fine. And, so I kept growing and I kept asking questions, and they still weren't seeing those definitive moments between people. And I admit I don't have a ton of that in my work while I was in the Navy. But one day I was out with Mary Calvert, and I was shooting the what do you call it?
It looks like the basic school.
The sea trials. I was shooting the sea trials, and she said, you're concentrating all on what's going on in front of you, and there's so much going on behind you. And I noticed, I don't have it here, but I noticed people coming together, having moments, laughing, and making fun of people that were falling off the monument and things like that. And I was missing those shots, and I was like, that's what Chip was talking about. And now Mary had to school me and drill it into my head. So, slowly going through that. And again, like I said, I didn't see that while I was in the military, but when I got out, let me switch screens here. It really clicked for me. And I was noticing, these people moments, these interactions between people. And that's what I wanted to concentrate on, these moments down, where nobody sees the camera, and they're just themselves having moments, out in the park and stuff. And that speaks to me. And I, again, okay, now I see what they were talking about. I started a project, and Mickey's going to yell at me because I haven't continued and finished it, but it's called The Lean. And when you see two people who are attracted to each other at the first time, they're right here at first, but as they talk, they start leaning into each other. And then you'll have a moment where there's a hand touch, or maybe on the shoulder or something. And I started seeing that as I'm photographing. I'm like, oh yeah, this is really cool, and so I started shooting that type of stuff. I mean, it doesn't really answer your question, but as far as finding a project, asking people's advice, and there's just, like I said before, there's just so much talent out there with experience, both in the military, and go to the Eddie Adams workshop, go to the DC shoot off, go to the DOD workshop, go to Missouri photo workshop, apply for all those. And they're just going to help you. Yeah. So that was my, where I'm at now. I mean, I work for the USDA now, and I'm not doing still imagery anymore. I'm doing video, and I don't have any of the video, but let me stop my screen sharing. But, find personal projects and continue at it. And this COVID's killed me. COVID, I was telling Mickey earlier today on the phone, I haven't shot anything since last March. So we're going on a year, and I haven't shot anything. I haven't picked up the camera. When I go hiking or something, I'll shoot something and birds and stuff, but nothing that has filled my soul.
He talked about Chip, and I love Chip because Chip is that hard-nosed photo editor that will, I remember helping review a project and being publicly embarrassed by Chip by the fact that he said, "What the hell are you thinking?" If your mentor is blowing smoke up your butt and telling you are rainbows and, butterscotch and all of that, get a better mentor. You don't need somebody who says that your work is beautiful. You need somebody who's going to tear your stuff apart constructively, but somebody who's kindly going to tear your stuff apart and tell you, when you get to a certain point. My mentor right now, I've got 100 images in my veterans gallery. And I've had a national show on this. I've had a museum show. It was a huge space, and I'm, like, oh, look at me, this is great, I'm blah, blah, blah. And he let me have my moment for a little while, but now he's told me, you know what, I want to go back and I want to sit down and I want to re-edit those images. because I know there's a way more data inside those images, and I know your black and white images could be way more expressive than you're letting your edits be. And I think you need to redo your work. And that's what I need. I mean, it sucks, but sometimes you need somebody to tell you your work does not rule. You know, you suck just as much as the rest of us, you know, and you need to keep working. You know, I need that motivation to keep working. I need that motivation to have to make up something new. Brien and I were talking about how it just sucks. I've shot 2 portraits in the last 12 months, well, 6 months. You know, I shot one the other day of a biker. I still work on my biker project. And I was so grateful to have somebody in the studio, and I was grateful to be in a mask, and I was grateful to be able to create a piece of art. And when the guy wanted to entertain himself and play with me back with, he's like, hey, what if we do this? What if we do, you know, the answer is always yes. If a client or somebody you're shooting a picture of says, well, hey, what do you think about if I do this? The answer is yes, because yes moves you forward. Yes moves the discussion in the positive. You know, even if the piece doesn't turn out the way you think it should, it at least generated the idea, and it let you, you know, expand upon an idea, and it forced you to get creative with lighting or position or expression or the definitive moment, to hunt and find for that definitive moment or something expressive in lighting or something like that. So just work. I was so grateful to work the other day. It was, I mean, I love doing the production I'm doing, and I enjoy doing that. But man, having somebody in the studio that brought in a motorcycle and some of their gear and let me play around with stuff, oh, it was great.
Now, Matt, you working with all hands and working at DMA, we work around, and I should say I used to work there, but we work around a lot of young, you know, soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen. That you know, look up to us in a sense for what we've done in this career field. What advice do you give them as they're transitioning while they're at the 9-year point, while they're getting ready to move on? How do you let folks know that they're ready for visual journalism on the outside world?
No one's ready, man. Just fact. That's it. No one's ready. So what do you do in the absence of readiness? You tell them to file their VA disability claim. That's it. That's the most important advice I got. Literally, that's it.
No, yeah, totally, definitely.
Everything that could be said has been said. But you know, from just like a creative, artistic, or career-wise standpoint, you know, honestly, I haven't run into too many service members that want to do this after. Most of them don't. Even while they're doing it, most of them don't, and that's fine. So if we're speaking to like the select few who, like, A, want to do this, B, love doing it. I don't. There's also not a good way to frame this or put this too, because we have been going through a pandemic for a year, right? So if I'm a couple shades removed, we're all a little far removed from what it might be like to get out during a pandemic, especially with like historic unemployment, with the economy just kind of like on life support from Wall Street, basically. With everything working the way it's working, you know, this is akin to the 2008 financial crisis. This is akin to your 9/11s. This is catastrophic. So honestly, like, any answers we give right now may not be super relevant to the people we're trying to talk to. We don't know. But you can always file your VA disability claim, and you absolutely need to do that well before you get out. And you need to document all your injuries, and you need to talk to people about the problems that you're having. That's the most important thing you can do before you leave.
Those TAPS classes were vital, and I can't recommend, I can't recommend highly enough. You attend those TAPS classes, because I filed for my VA 6 months prior to getting out, and the month after I retired, VA check. So, you know, I was comfortable. And Matt's right. You got to do it. You got to do it. And there, you know, there's so many TAPs, the DAV, and then the fellow veterans that are always, you know, here to help you. And, you know, all of us will help anybody who reaches out to us. But do it, because, you know, there's definitely some boxes that you should check before you get out, before you transition out. That will
Yeah, you need to
help you through.
document everything that's wrong with you before you get out, honestly. You know, if you snore, I mean, I'm on a CPAP machine now, but if I had been a good boy and gone to the doctor and gotten onto a sleep therapy like I am now, and I sleep lovely now, and the VA pays for my materials, but I'm not getting any disability because of it, and that's a big chunk that I missed out on because I was just going to tough it out and not go to sick call. So I mean, sleep therapy is a little tiny thing, but I mean, there's a lot of other stuff. I mean, Matt's got 2 broken legs that, you know, definitely, I'm sure hinders every moment, every day.
One nice thing about here's a fun little adage that y'all can take this with you, is that there's no winner in the trauma Olympics. That applies physically and mentally. But I think that's what's so important to stress, Mickey, is you know, document the stuff. It's like you have to have like 2 fights, right? You have to have the fight with yourself and you have to have the fight with the institution. So I don't know which one's harder, but probably the self fight. But in order to seek help, you need to first acknowledge that the institution is maybe doing you wrong. And by telling you that you don't need to go seek help, they may be actively working against you in that regard, whatever it may be. And then you have to have that conversation with yourself. And that's, you know, most people don't get past step 1. And that's the real problem. That's an issue there too. And that's something to just, even if it's just mentioned, like, you know, information repeated is information retained. So it's worth being said over and over again. Is just, you know, you need to have those conversations in the back of your head, and you need to go do something about it.
Well, and I think, you know, at least those who did combat camera, it was drilled into me that, oh, well, if you are documenting something or you're hurt, you won't be able to go to Iraq, or you won't be able to go on this mission or that. And I got advice early on that you have to, just like Matt said, you have to have a discussion with yourself and realize the military is not life. Okay. You're going to have a life after the military. So, you know, take care of yourself. And I made mistakes. I didn't go to medical all the time, especially when I wanted to fly and get water physiology and get ejection seat qual and all that stuff. You know, I was hurt and I was like, no, I want to go to that school first, you know, and get those quals. And maybe I should have documented some stuff, but am I paying for it now? Slightly, just like Mickey said, I got sleep apnea and I didn't record it while I was in the military. And, you know, so now the VA is paying for my CPAP, but I'm not getting any money for it. So.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. And it's tough. That's having those discussions with yourself, where you're having to choose, am I, you know, going to go to the doctor and tell them everything that's going on, because I know doing so, my days on a flight deck or a cockpit, you know, being an aerial photographer are over, right? Yep. And or my chances of going and doing this or doing that are now gone. Those things are tough. Those are hard discussions to have with yourself. But you're right, Matt. There is no real winners in those situations, in a sense. There unfortunately is a lot of losers in a sense of losing out on valuable benefits and things by simply not doing the documentation and taking care of those things as they're transitioning.
Yeah. And you know, it's sinister. It is sinister because it even if you do get the help that you need, it's still not going to be a good time for you. And again, regardless of what that may be,
right.
You know, it's just the institution, the bureaucracy. You need to poke it. You need to poke that bureaucracy, and it's hard or impossible for some folks to do too. That's also something to consider. It's tough. It's tough. But yeah, just look after yourself, man, woman, whomever, and yeah, we'll all get out of this alive.
So here's the question, and I'll pose it to all 3 of you. You have that soldier, sailor, marine, airman that's standing in front of you, deciding whether to get out or stay inside of the visual journalism realm. What advice do you give them? We'll start with you, Mickey.
Are we in today's climate, or are we 10 years down the road?
and that's the interesting aspect of it, is that we are in today's climate. And I know, Mickey, that you're a little bit removed from today's military climate.
Sure.
Which is completely different, which Matt can speak on, because I think that I really do see Matt as one of the last of a generation of, visual storytellers for the military before everything literally went left, in a lot of ways. So we'll start with today's climate for anybody that's coming to you for mentorship. But in today's industry, what advice are you giving them?
And how many do they have in?
10 years. They're right in the middle of their career.
Honestly, if somebody was 10 years in, I would say that 10 years more to have a pension, to be able to do what you want to do when you do, kind of like myself, like in my situation, I would grind it out for the next 10 years. And that being said, my last 10 years of the military was my best 10 years. I got exposed to the most people. I got the most opportunity for training. I got the most opportunity for advancement. I got the most opportunity to run into some most incredible people. I mean, you guys, I wouldn't be sitting here on this panel if I hadn't done that next 10 years, because I wouldn't have ever gone to ComCam. I mean, I would have been a ship sailor. And honestly, I probably, if I'd gotten out because I thought about it, I think I was at 11 years when I was done with a sea and a shore rotation, and I was looking at going back to sea, and I had 2 young kids. And so for me, it was really easy. It was absolute great benefits for my then ex-wife now, and for my 2 kids who have grown up with a military dad, and it gave us medical and you got to look at it in the numbers. The job is really pretty cool. I mean, we are not chalking and chaining airplanes. We are not working down in a bilge. We are not, donning, AFFF firefighting gear and having to, fight fires and stuff like that. And those are all amazing professions, but we're getting the opportunity to tell those stories, which is a definite benefit, or a definite blessing in our life, is to be able to actually be exposed to all those people. I look at military people that I've served with and had little conversations with, and realize how narrow a career other careers in the Navy were, and how broad and expansive my career was. And I was sort of a lab rat until I became a shooter at the very end of my career. I mean, I was a lab kind of guy and worked in photo and was a machine repair technician and stuff. I was a lab guy for the first 12 years of my Navy career. And it wasn't until I turned the 15-year mark that I became a shooter again. So I would say, for all the benefits that those next 10 years might bring into your life, I definitely would say that you should weight it towards taking those benefits and looking at those benefits, especially based in today's economy, what's going on out here. I don't know if I could be the photographer I am currently, and I'm a photographer who gets to do the job he wants to do when he wants to do it. I get to say no more than I have to say yes. So that's definitely a blessing, as a photographer, to being able to choose and pick and work on the projects and the people. And I don't shoot production because I don't have to. I don't shoot weddings because I don't have to. I don't shoot quinceañeras, unless you are related to me, or I owe you the biggest favor in the world. I don't shoot general happy snap photography type stuff. Having a pension, having a retirement check and a disability check definitely makes my life a possibility.
And Brien, for you?
Right. Well, I mean, Mickey hit it on the head. I think if you have reached a certain number of years, 10, doing the last 10 of my career went by so quickly, because exactly what Mickey said, it was by far the more exciting one. Syracuse, Combat Camera, All Hands Magazine, and then my last year and a half was literally on a ship going down to South America and hitting 4 of those countries. The last 10 years was great. So the time flew by. I will say the first 10 years didn't fly by. So you have those thoughts. You have, at the 8-year mark, I could probably get out and I picked up some skills that I know I can accomplish and do things. But in today's world, drastically different than when I was at my 10-year mark. Sure, there's some GS jobs out there, but the civilian world, you gotta. I mean, Mickey's has been building those networks up for a while, so he's getting work. But it's a grind. You're going to have to grind it out to, find work coming in constantly. And I'm contracted with AP and Zuma and another agency, and they shut it down. All contracted freelancers shut down during COVID. It's only staff photographers. So any extra money I wanted to make shooting, I was shooting the Baltimore Ravens a lot and the sports out of Maryland, that all got shut down. I didn't have an opportunity to shoot that anymore. And when I came back to telework here in Texas, because my foot wasn't in here to begin with, there's no way I was going to find freelance work, definitely shooting sports, for those agencies, because it's just staff, because they have people they have to protect. And so my VA, my military retirement, and I'm lucky I got a GS job. I've got all that is helping me do stuff I want to do on the side and love. So my advice to that person reaching their 10-year mark is think of the benefits, definitely do the pros and cons. And in today's climate, it's scary for someone who's getting out, and I understand. And you're going to find work. It's just might going to be a little harder.
Matthew, you touched on it a little bit earlier about you don't have a lot of folks coming to you with these questions or anything else, but what are you seeing trend-wise right now, being so connected with young service members that are visual storytellers in the Navy? What do you see with them, and what advice do you give them?
So I think you can only speak so much, right? To your own experiences, and for me, as just kind of just like a white dude in the military, like, it's been pretty simple. Like I haven't had to deal with a lot of things, and you see where I'm going with this. I think Mickey and Brien really kind of nailed like the academic side of this, but there's an emotional one too. Like the decisions that you are making to whether you want to stay or leave. For me personally, like I just, I knew that my skill set could be used to better leverage with a little more scope. And I just like fighter jets, so I went and worked for the Navy. But that's not everybody. That's not remotely everybody. That 10-year mark could have gone fast or slow for me, but like, I don't know what it's like to be a woman in the military or be a person of color in the military, and what kind of things that they're facing or going through. How the institution is maybe denying them opportunities. Because like it's, right now we're on a panel discussion. It's all white dudes. There's something to be said about that. And it's not an indictment of any of us. This is just kind of how it shakes. So my advice, again, is have that conversation with yourself. Have that emotional conversation with yourself. Evaluate if the institution is actually helping you help yourself. If it's not doing that, get the fuck out. It's not that simple, but it can be that simple. And there's everything else you have to figure out, but it's tough. It's definitely tough. But yeah, that's about it.
My advice has always been along those same lines. If you cannot take advantage of the service will take advantage of you. And that's kind of one of the things that you have to have a discussion with yourself. Yeah. And
and I had that discussion with myself quite often, and I'm sure Mickey will attest to this because he knows my background a little bit. I was one who always wanted to have cameras in my hand, and when they were like, "Well, you're not doing," I mean, Mickey was a phenomenal, great photographer and a great sailor. I wasn't a great sailor because I wanted to be a photographer. And that so many times, what are you doing to make chief? What are you doing to this? I'm like, I'm doing my job. I'm doing what I love to do. I'm producing what you like and what I like and what's getting the job done. And I'm mentoring the people below me. And that's what I want to do. I don't, if you want to make me chief, yes, great. I need the money, but I'm not going to put down my cameras and sit behind a desk. Not everybody does that. Johnny Bavera had a great position shooting. A lot of chiefs were out shooting. I get it. And that might have been just maybe my personal cloud that I was like, well, most chiefs I see, put the camera gear down. I didn't take that route. I was like, nope, I know what I want. And I went for it. And I made that conscious decision early on at around the 10-year mark when I applied for Syracuse and all that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to apply for Syracuse. If I get it, I'm staying the rest of the 10 years and retiring.
Yeah, I know when I put on chief and went on my first deployment as a chief, and they're like, well, you're going to be the crew chief and you're going to be stuck in the rear with the gear and stuff like that. It was no, well, issue me my camera. There was a fight with the institution, if you want to call it that. No, I was okay with the fact that I wasn't going to get to go out on the really cool and the fast paced and work out with this and that and blah, blah, because I was responsible for those 15 guys. And I was responsible for getting our product back to JCCC or to whoever else we were, supposed to get it to. But every little funky job, and this maybe is also for the chief who doesn't want to not be a photographer, and when they retire wants to carry that camera and continue to be a photographer, make sure you have the camera and go shoot the stupid junk. When you're at the forward base and the guys are all out on the wire, but the CBs are pouring cement because they're going to put a new platform for a new generator over there, go document that, because that needs to get documented too. Do the junk so that your guys that are coming back can get a break. So, because you're going to send them back out the wire, facilitate that break and take on the junk jobs so that your guys can go out and do the cool jobs. Again, it keeps you shooting. It does. I mean, I won't show off any of the stuff that I shot in the military in my last 4 or 5 years because it's junk jobs. It's a lot of happy snaps. I got to shoot the Secretary of the Navy for 11 days bouncing around in a ship. It's happy snaps. It's glad handing. It's tons of Secretary of England shaking hands with 1.5 million other people. I bounced in 7 different locations in 11 days, or 11 different locations in 7 days. And it's not, there's nothing to it. There's no substance there. I didn't do any substance shooting, but I shot junk so that my guys could go out and shoot really cool stuff.
Where were you in my career?
Well, honestly, I hope I was there for the guys I was there for. I can only be there for the guys I was there for. And I know that Brien and I have even had this discussion for years now, post-military of I love my retirement check, and I liked the job I did as a chief. I liked the job that I, was able to be there and make sure that we went from, when 9/11 happened and we didn't have enough gear and we didn't have enough stuff and we didn't have enough training, and and we were kind of doing our own field training to the point where when I left the Navy, that unit was getting professional training through operator courses and through special, other people, and they were getting certified and they were getting better deployments and they were being taken care of when they were in the field with the people they should have been taken care of,
It's tough. You two, and myself a little bit and incorporated in that, came from a generation where we were absolutely the last of that happening as it pertains to public affairs, mass communication in the military. Nowadays, folks, they're going to keep a camera in their hands between, the first 2 to 6 years, maybe up to the 8-year mark. At that point, at 8 years, there's very few people in the military after 8 years enlisted that are still holding a camera in their hands. And unfortunately, the institution frowns upon them for doing so heavily, even more than it was for me.
Really?
And for the Air Force, I was being mentored by JT as he moved on and being ridiculed for being a master sergeant in a master sergeant position, an E7 position as a shooter. There was only 4 of them left in the Air Force, and he was in one of them, and he was still ridiculed. And you're talking about an individual that gave back his whole career, mentoring, teaching, everything, the workshops, everything that he's done, then was still ridiculed by the establishment for not being a quote unquote leader and manager, and almost ridiculed to the point where they were calling him selfish in a sense, for the least selfish person that I'd ever met in my career. And then after he left and he was, and he was gone, then it came to me. Then it was me. It was like, well, you've been an airman this many years. You've really held on to that position. I was like, I didn't put myself here. I didn't put, you guys put me here. And now you're ridiculing me for being here for so long, right? It was so weird to be in that special duty assignment, right, and being ridiculed by the folks that are handing down assignments for blaming you for being there. And it became, it's a really weird thing that's happening as it pertains to generalists and specialists anymore in our career field. And now, mind you, I think that the skill sets that these folks are learning at Adenfos, learning video, learning writing stories, learning public affairs, learning strategic communication, learning photography is all a beautiful thing. And I think that but being a generalist in all of them is not going to get you where you need to be towards the outside. You've got to find, and trying to explain this to a lot of people is tough. They're all different languages. Even though that they all fit under language, they're 5 separate languages that you were trying to have these individuals learn. And for that service member, you have to find your language, right? Find something that you love and that you want to do. And the beauty of it is, the beauty of photography, the beauty of videography, editing, communication in general, it's there, military or not, right? You, like Brian said earlier, you learn the skill set. Matter of fact, military hours, 7:30 to 4:30, the worst times to shoot anyways. So, it's like, it learn that skill set, find it, but understand that if you are going to maintain this throughout your career, that you are going to have to change because the establishment has changed. You may be a photographer for 2 years. You may be a video editor for 2 years. You may be giving base tours for 2 years because they're all one career field now. And
which, by the way,
if I could interject real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, that's another like primary reason why I got out of the Marine Corps is because once you've hit staff sergeant, you have sergeants not doing the job anymore.
Right.
And there's like kind of, I'm speaking on the Marine Corps, but like the larger institution, if you will, the Department of Defense. Benny, you're absolutely right, and it just goes back to bureaucracy's only job is to make itself more complex, right? So as it grows and as it settles and as it does its thing, like a house, it's just going to require more and more maintenance. And that's precisely what the institution is asking of our leaders, where they're not asking them to be leaders, they're asking them to be administrators. And it doesn't take a whole lot of skill or effort to be an administrator. So it's a real issue. It's a real problem. And honestly, if we're looking at like the meta strings pulling this movement, it's the upper out system, and B, it's the 2, 3, 4 year surface terms. If folks don't have the option to stay in one spot and maintain that generational knowledge about the things they do, not only in their location, but in their career field, how's that knowledge going to get passed down? There can only be so many workshops. There can only be so many DoD worldwides. This isn't just a public affairs problem or a combat camera problem or a mass communications problem. This is a military problem, and this is how it impacts our community. You don't maintain generational knowledge. You backfill MOSs and positions with other failed out MOSs, like in the Marine Corps. We got a lot of reconnaissance and intelligence drops, people that did not want to be there. And I know that's happening all over the services too. It absolutely is. Where do we put our bad eggs? Where do we put our folks? Oh, just shuffle them over here, whatever. So, those are some of the things that are kind of like, those are the challenges we face when it comes to retaining that knowledge and just kind of like spread loading that out. And it's like, look, man, I like my job. I don't see the Washington Post, not sending their 10-year veteran photojournalist out because the new guy needs to do their thing and I just need to do paperwork back at the desk. That doesn't make sense. And, you know, obviously the military doesn't need to swing the pendulum that far, but there's a middle ground there for sure. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I understand the reasonings of why these career fields were condensed and the numbers, and it all comes from a leadership perspective, and it all comes down to the numbers, right? Where they're going to make cuts, and it's like, are we going to take mass cuts in one area, or are we going to try to condense this to even keep this alive? And the crazy thing about our career field and our profession is that it is being cut and condensed, and we're taking away from it in a time period of where it's the most important. It's, you know, fighting disinformation campaigns, social media, having a voice and pushing the narrative forward on social media, recruiting for the military is taking hits, retention for the military is taking hits. And we were always the voice of the military members that helped to push those things forward, to help with retention, to help with recruiting, to help with telling the story of the military and being the eyes of the military for, you know, the civilian market and for, you know, our stakeholders that are paying the bills in Congress, right? And that's the funniest thing about this whole dynamic on our career field. And it's unfortunate. And I think this is not necessarily getting to that a bitch session, you know, portion of what we're talking about. But I think all of us are so passionate about what we were given, what we love, and what we see, and the potential in all of it, and then what is essentially happening. But and then I'll go into that, you know, to one of my last questions here for you guys is we'll talk about reward and regret, and tell me about your career, and in a sense of, do you regret anything? Do you regret the military experience, and what is the greatest reward that you received from it? And I asked that to all three of you.
Let me think about that for a second.
Right? That's a straight up deep question, Benny.
I'm pretty close to the chest on it, so I could go first if y'all need a second.
Please.
Not a whole ton of regrets. I stumbled into the job. And Benny, you know my origin story. Like, it's because I broke my leg that I got into public affairs, and I had no idea that the military had image makers, or this whole apparatus, honestly. No idea when I first joined. But so Benny, the question was regrets and what was it?
What's the
rewards?
greatest reward you received from your career, and do you have any regrets about the military experience?
I regret that I just didn't say more. That's what I regret. You know, whether it was just like people dogging on each other, saying stupid stuff, say racist, misogynist stuff, or just like, you know, operating in an environment in which like the command was, you know, just super toxic, just not saying enough about that. That's a regret that I have for sure, 100%. So we got to be loud about it now, right? It's never too late to be loud about it. But yeah, my last tour, right? I mean, this is like kind of like my final reason for getting out of the military. It's like I had kind of, you know, been there, done that in some senses, in some regards. Like I had been on a combat deployment to Afghanistan, however short that was. I went on a unit deployment program where we went to Japan for 6 months and just kind of sprung to a bunch of other countries to train with their troops. I've been all over the South Pacific. I've been all over the Middle East. And then I went on a Marine Expeditionary Unit in 2017. That's where I went to Syria. I was in Syria for 5 months, documenting the artillery barrage against ISIS at Raqqa. That was what was rewarding about that is it was just the first time that I had an actual opportunity to be with this group of people for more than a week or 2 weeks or a couple days. Like I was living with these folks for months literally in the dirt, in dirt holes, like, you know, and just to kind of see how like my perspective on them shifted over time and like how I began to photograph them. And that was really cool. just to be able to like, hey, just establish such a rapport with some folks that like knew what they really knew what they were doing too. They were just really good at their jobs, and like they were just really easy to photograph. They were fun. They were really fun. We established that real quick. One of the guys I interviewed the first night of our deployment when we got on the ship, I heard him. He was a section chief. His name was Adam Chrisman. And as soon as I heard him open his mouth and start talking, I went right up to him. I was like, "Hey man, I'm Matt. What's up? I'm gonna interview you one day. I don't know when, but I'm going to. June 3rd, 3 o'clock in the morning, 2017. Hey, Adam, what's up? How about that interview?" You know, I had all that time to get to know this dude. So like 3 o'clock rolled around, they're done with their fire mission. I could have like a 4-hour conversation with him until breakfast, make some coffee, smoke a cigarette, and then go sleep in the 110-degree sun. It was nice. It was not nice, but like, you know, that's the kind of stuff that will stay with you forever. Like those moments. So that was rewarding. That's what was most rewarding for me.
Brien, reward and regret.
Well,
What?
reward. I mean, I have a lot of experiences that were rewarding, but I mean, the brotherhood and the community that I'm part of still is really rewarding. I have lifelong friends that I've known since, you know, obviously almost the first day I joined the military, that were in this career field. That's my biggest reward, and experiencing other cultures. I mean, I went to Syracuse in 2001, and I remember sitting in the ethics class and them arguing about, these young students arguing about, oh, well, they don't, you know, the Middle East, you know, they were talking badly about the people over in the Middle East. And I was like, no, that's not it at all. You have no clue what you're talking about. You know, I was there. I had coffee sitting down in the dirt in Baghdad and in Iraq, and they're wonderful people. And I am so happy I got to experience I mean, I've been to 43 different countries while I was in the military. I mean, all those different peoples and cultures, and it's just so rewarding. And then again, the brotherhood. I mean, Bennie and I, all of us here, you know, friends that I'm going to have for a lifelong. That's my reward. The regrets. I think Matt hit on some, that there was times where I saw things, and I think I talked to Mickey about it a little bit today, earlier in the phone call, but there was things I saw my 20 years in the Navy that maybe I should have said something, you know, to protect a fellow shipmate or something that was being bullied. You know, there was nothing, I never really saw any fights, or, I mean, there was always little skirmishes and stuff, people wrestling around, but when they picked on some people, I should have known better and said something. And, you know, you get with the click and you're like, you know, okay, I shouldn't have let that go by. And I think that's a regret I have. And the other regret is self-responsibility. And Bennie, you hit on it a little bit on when you were talking about, you know, you're going to do 2 years in the still side, and then all of a sudden you're going to do 2 years in the, you know, escorting people around a base or something. That's an opportunity, actually. And you'll find that out when you're trying to get a job out in the GS world, that when you're escorting those people around and networking there, that's you're learning stuff about being a public affairs officer. And trust me, there's 1,000 public affairs officer jobs out there. And I didn't take advantage of those opportunities. When, you know, I was sitting around, I don't smoke, but I was coking and joking with the guys. I should have been out there, you know, shooting more projects than I did. And
it doesn't stay in your system as long. That's smart. Sorry, I had to do it.
Man.
I actually had never seen, if we're being recorded, I had never seen that stuff till I joined the military. So it was, but so, you know, that's my only regret is, and it was self-responsibility of going out and doing, instead of goofing off, is maybe doing more projects and things like that. you know.
Mickey, what's the regrets? What's the greatest rewards that you'll take with you?
I mean, Brien touched on it. The brotherhood. I mean, and I say that as a general gender neutral term. I mean, I do believe
Right.
that I have brothers and sisters in this family. It's a brotherhood that is made up of tons of people all over the place, and that's the key word is brother or people. I have people who, when I say, hey, I'm going to go XYZ, hey, I'm going to be in New York. I've got people actually calling me up and saying, hey, while you're in New York, we got to have coffee, or do you need a place to stay? Or I had an offer to work out of somebody's Soho studio. If I had some veterans I wanted to photograph, they would be happy to give me their studio for however long I needed it for. And I would not have, if I hadn't met this person at an event, at a workshop, or at a whatever, I met this person it was at one of these workshops, then I wouldn't have that friendship with that person, and I wouldn't have that fellowship with that person. So maybe fellowship is a better word, because it's gender neutral or whatever. But yeah, I mean, Brien and I sat on the phone forever today. I don't think I've had a phone call that long with somebody in a long time, but it's because it was over 3 hours. It was. I mean, I went for my freaking hike and got my exercise today while I was sitting and talking with him. And I realized that I owe him more phone calls. I owe Bennie more phone calls. I owe, I owe it to these friends who I don't see very often to stay in touch better. So I guess that's a regret on top of a benefit that I'm very blessed. The military has blessed me with a life that has brought an amazing amount of unbelievably talented people, and the talented people who are not shy of sharing that talent, and they're not shy of constructive criticism, and they're not shy to share a technique with you, and they're not shy to share a project that they're working on, that if you're working on a project that's sort of like that project, well, then we're all benefiting. It's not like one of those like, well, you can't do this because I'm doing this. I mean, if you're speaking about veterans, you're speaking about veterans, you're speaking about veterans. We should all be speaking about veterans and our issues and our problems and our things like that, which brings me to, and I'm going to try to hold it together, brings me to a really big regret that I have. For the 4 years that I was deploying guys and gals to arduous places in the world and redeploying them because I didn't have anybody left, and then not listening to my own inner, space when they told me, I'm fine, I like it out there, I want to go again, and sometimes taking the easy out of letting them go back on deployment. I wish I hadn't let that happen. I wish I had forced more downtime. I wish I had been in the position. I wish I had gotten promoted a little more so that I had a little more power, so that I could say no more often. I mean, I said no a lot in my last 4 years in the Navy. It didn't stay a no super often. Sometimes no got trumped over the top of it, but my no's happened. But I really wish that no would have been an answer I used more when it came to people in the military and taking care of them. I'm concerned. I live with it in my head, but I'm pretty sure that one of our friends is not here with us anymore because of an accident that happened, because we deployed him too much, and it messed him up, and it didn't really surface for years, but when it did surface, it really messed him up to the point where, he just wasn't himself anymore. And I'm really hoping that it was an accident, and maybe it was a moment of not paying attention, and maybe it wasn't. But I do live with the idea that, I've got it in my brain that it wasn't an accident. And I don't think I'll ever be able to let go of that. I don't think anybody ever could tell me, even if he came back and said, hey, Mickey, it was an accident, it was a moment of not paying attention, you know. I know he was hurting, you know, and I know that we contributed to him hurting that much by letting him go out the door as many times as he did, because he was hardcore combat camera warrior and he took on another deployment. And I think that that was the wrong thing to do. It was the easy thing to do, and it got the job done in the moments that I was in charge of the job, but I don't think it did the job the right way.
Yeah, that's
and that was a powerful story, and I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier, about having the strength to, you know, the inner strength to know you've had enough, and you need to go get stuff documented, because we're talking about life after the military. And yes, we had all these experiences, but you know, if you know that person you were talking about, Mickey, you know, might have noticed this about him or herself, and having, you know, okay, yeah, I want to look gung-ho and keep doing it, because I did the same thing. I was like, I want to go on that mission. You know, my back is killing me. I got problems. I went on it, and it just worsened. I should have maybe gone to medical and got it documented, and you know, maybe I would have been better than I am now. So.
Yeah, and the worst 6 inches on any combat deployed person, I don't care what field you're in, is the 6 inches between your ears. You know, it's where the most pain ends up, you know, staying. I think it's the longest series of injuries is, you know, you hold on to that stuff and you relive it, and it's there forever. You know.
That is a very true statement. There's a lot of us that live with a lot of things that we did and a lot of things that we've seen that not a lot of people will ever know about. And yeah, so to anybody that's out there that's listening to this, that has been through these things, has seen these things or whatever, the best thing that you can possibly do is take care of yourself and go talk to somebody. Get with the DAV. We talked about just transitioning in general as a veteran. And you hit on it, Brian, getting with the American Legion, the DAV, getting those folks to look over your medical records, getting copies of your medical records, as hard as it is, getting copies of your medical records and everything, and preparing yourself for the outside world, no matter at what point you are in your career. And I wish that, I can't say that it was necessarily a regret of mine, you know, but, and we all, you know, touched on it, but just getting in and being honest with yourself and going, seeing when things do hurt, whether it's mentally or physically, getting in and going and talking to somebody. Because in the end, when you're out of the uniform and you take the boots off, you're left with what, what remains. And that can be tough for a lot of folks. It's there is such a sense of security when you're in that uniform, because you're surrounded by people that are going to protect you and take care of you, inside of a base that's going to protect you and take care of you. And the outside world is a much different space, and you don't even realize it. You don't realize those things until, you know, until they manifest themselves. When, you know, you hear it with the PTSD and these things like that. I've known veterans that PTSD has sprung up on them 10, 15, 20 years after they've been out of service. It starts to manifest itself, and or the nightmares start coming of things that they said or been a part of. And so just talking, you know, the old timers, as Mickey, you've probably heard it with talking a lot of your veterans, they talked about being shell shocked back in the day. They didn't have a word for it, but it's a real thing, and it's been there the whole time. And we all deal with it in some form or fashion, but they chose not to tell their stories for so many years. I've sat with so many veterans that I was interviewing them for the first time in front of their family, World War II veterans, first time their family had ever heard their stories and heard what granddad or dad had been through. And I would just urge people to tell your story, tell the stories of those around you, let this stuff out and get it out, and talk to somebody, because that's something that I've seen too many times with fellow friends that come back and hurt them. Rewards and regrets on the transition. The military experience, it was fantastic for me, and it's not that for everybody, but for me it was fantastic, and it raised me. It raised me in a community that I'm proud of. I'm not always proud of some of the things, but you're proud of the experience and everything that you that you learned, and it's put me in a position to take care of my family and be set, and essentially for the rest of my life, taking care of the rest of my life, my benefits and my pension and my disability payments and those things that happen. It's tough. I've got kids now that ask me about joining, and my own kids, right, about joining, and it's like, man, do 4 years and get out. Like, it's that's my advice to them. There's so many benefits. You take advantage of what you can, get your schooling, get your veteran status, grow up inside of it, and then you have to make that determining marker. And that conversation changes every couple of years on whether you should stay or go. But whatever you do determine, only do what benefits, what will benefit you and your family, right? Because at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, that's the people that are taking care of you. And that's, so take care of yourself in that sense. It's our career field, extremely rewarding, but it is stressful as hell. It's merged with another career field in public affairs that is stressful as hell. And they took I read a thing when I was teaching at Denfos that was released by Military Times that said the top 10 most stressful jobs in the military. And our career fields and multimedia and combat camera were listed in the top 10, as well as public affairs. And now those two jobs are merged together in a sense. Wow. So again, take care of yourself, because those stressors are real and it'll get you burnt out super quick. And if you love this, if you love having a camera in your hands, being a visual journalist, a storyteller, or whatever, take care of yourself, because it'll get you so burnt out so fast, because it is a fast-paced job in a fast-paced world for military visual journalism. Just take care of yourself and enjoy that ride. It's and it'll tell you when it's over. The ride will let you know when it's over, whether that's career progression wise, whether that's health wise, whether that's, just, you'll know. But just trust your gut in those senses. You'll know when the ride is over. So that's the advice that I give to anybody that comes up to me. I can't push you forward. I'm not going to persuade you. I would never try to persuade anybody to stay or go. I will just say that you'll know when it's your time to go. So, gentlemen,
Fair.
This has been fantastic. And there's so
Who are you
much
calling
more
gentlemen?
right? So much more we could talk
Salty
about.
sailors.
Yeah, we're missing we're just missing a soldier and a Coast Guardman to share in this conversation.
Right.
There's one too many seamen or sailors.
Honorary seaman.
Yeah, and honor, yeah. So, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you would like to talk about as it pertains to a military career and then transitioning? Anything else that you would want to touch on?
Obviously, use your GI
I think
Bill.
we covered it. I mean,
We didn't talk. We didn't say a word.
It's there,
about the
and
GI
it's
Bill,
there
but
for-
It's there, and now for service members getting out, it's there forever.
Forever.
You can use it till the day you die.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's the most. I mean, I haven't used mine yet. Like, I'm probably gonna take 4 years soon, and just like go up to NYU. Like, it's money. It's wasting money. That's the thing too. Like, it's a house payment. It's a mortgage payment.
Yeah, I was looking at it, and now that it's a forever thing, it's definitely even if I went back to photography classes and took the photo 101 and played in the darkroom again, and you never know, that you might end up being able to continue being a mentor to some of the younger people, and try not to throw too many sea stories at them, but enjoy the smell of fixer, and enjoy the finality of the fact that you only got 24 exposures in a roll versus 1,000 exposures on a card.
Yeah, I think that's
kind of
something to talk
around
about.
the idea.
I wish, just in general, military experience in general, that there was somebody to school me on real estate, with all these moves and buying homes, and I could be sitting on a little nest egg at this point.
How many homes do you own, Benny?
No, well, that's not here nor there. But
Interest-free VA
but
home
I will say that
loan.
VA loan, let me tell you about, even just during this past
Yes.
pandemic, I've refinanced my house twice,
Oh.
you know, during the pandemic, simply because the VA rates are the lowest they've ever been, ever. So,
2.4.
yeah, well, less than 2. So
What?
yeah, oh yeah, buddy. Yeah. So it's
Benny
now,
just threw it down on the table.
yeah,
Boom.
now's the time to look at things like that. And the same with whether it's your GI Bill and getting all that tuition free, you know, schooling while you're in. If you love this job, go take business courses and take photography courses or communication courses or strategic communication courses on the outside, like Brien hit upon. Even if you're thinking about going the GS route or staying inside this community, you go from being a still photographer of 20 years to being a public affairs officer for the U.S. Marshals, which is, let me tell you, it's a big pay difference. And just having the skill sets can put you to that next level, because there are very few jobs out there that just say in the GS side that just say photographer, right, anymore. Or, you know, video editor. And I would tell you, if you really wanted to make money out of what we're doing, study video editing as much as you can, right? Because that's yeah. And then let's talk about the other big thing in the room that was never schooled to me when I was young. I had it, lost it all in a divorce, but your TSP, right? So max out your TSP while you're in service. Nobody tells you it should be, and you know what, it is mandatory almost now when you start up, the way that they're doing retirements now. You know, just going on to,
I wish it was for me, man. I made that mistake.
but
Oh, it didn't even
I wish it
come
was for
to
me.
be
I made
available.
that mistake, and
yeah,
Yeah, it wasn't even
Right.
available until my last 8 years in the Navy. So I only got to contribute into it for 8 years.
right.
Yeah.
But having the ability now to contribute to a TSP, and then having the resources like the seasonal TSP forums on Facebook, where these folks are coaching you how to, you know, I've watched people during COVID, you know, make $250,000 this past year off their TSP by learning how to play the game. So those are the resources that I wish early on as a service member that somebody would have came to me and said, you know, I was out going on every photo shoot that I possibly could and turning down going to the classroom, right? You know, I don't want to take school. I don't want to take any courses because I'm on every TDY that I could possibly go on. That was, you know, the reward is in front of you, is exciting, you know, and you get to travel and you get to do all these things, but to set yourself up for transition in the future, take as many classes as you can while they're tuition free and save that GI Bill to do whatever the hell you want to do with it on the outside, basket weaving in New York for $2,600 a month.
Underwater
Culinary
basket
school.
weaving.
Yeah.
Matt's calling now.
Max out your TSP as much as you can, and buy property. You know, if I would have bought I was stationed in my first assignment for 7.5 years. I should have bought a home. Really should have.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's something I should have done forever ago.
Is just, you know, I would recommend, you know, just real estate and learning that market and that game as well. If you're going to stay in through your career and you're living next to a military base, they're forever going to be there, you know, essentially. You know, buying property outside of that is only going to make you money in the end and provide you a nest egg in the end. So those are the resources that I wish outside of this career field that somebody would have came to me and said, you know, I could go back in time and tell my young Airman Davis self, though, that would be the pointers that I would give myself.
Yeah, rent is always going to be more than a mortgage payment, and you don't take anything with you. Yeah, wish I had learned that really young. I mean, it was nice to live on base for a little while and stuff like that, but 100%, yeah. I didn't buy a house until after 9/11 and realized how much I lost out on opportunities.
So those are the things that I would do while I was in, and as I'm transitioning, take that last year, whatever, or 6 months, or whenever you make the decision that you're going to talk to your leadership and take the time to transition properly. Don't just cut and dry. Don't do it that way. Take the TSP classes, take 2 of them. take the resume writing classes, take all those things and prepare yourself for the outside. Get with the VA and DAV and all these other organizations have so many resources now for veterans that are transitioning, and take advantage of them. I know a guy transitioned out of our career field, went to school full-time in George Mason. They bought him camera gear and everything else to go to school, and now he's doing his own business on the outside. So the VA will set you, if you take advantage of it, again, it all comes down to that, can set you up nicely on the outside as well. So.
And the Paralyzed Veterans of America is not for, you don't have to be 100% paralyzed. You can actually have, you know, some issues or whatever issues, but they're definitely a great advocate in your fight against the VA.
Yeah, find one of those, what do they call them? The service organizations, it's like VSOs or I can't even remember the acronym now. Been too far gone from the military, but yeah, get yourself with a DAV, American Legion, or somebody to help you fight that fight.
And I know that in the Navy, and while I was in, I don't know if you could do it still, but you're allowed to take TAP class twice, like a year out, or maybe a little longer than a year out, and then 6 months out. And I did it, and I mean, yeah, it's the same class, but I got all that refreshed 6 months before getting out, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, just give that time back to yourself. I know way too many people that, you know, they get out, they have their date, and they didn't prepare themselves in that sense. It helps you to prepare mentally and just kind of to decompress a little bit physically as well, taking yourself out of that role. And I know it's hard to put the job down sometimes, and it's hard. Leadership sometimes won't allow you to do it, but talk to them and find ways to do so. So, well, gentlemen, I think we've exhausted a lot tonight, and I'm gonna tell you, this old back of mine is hurting sitting on this couch. But I've thoroughly enjoyed, you know, chatting with you, and I hope that this is beneficial. It's been beneficial for me just even having this conversation, and I think it's going to be beneficial for others, you know, listening to your experiences, seeing a little bit of your work. It's so funny. Here we are, you know, 4 photographers, and majority of this was all words, but you know, thanks for sharing a little bit of your work with us and
I could play a video for a closeout if you want.
Project.
As my plug, I have a project I'm working now.
Well, I would like for you at the end, go ahead, we'll start with you, Matt, just instead of showing or anything else, but I do want you to plug, you know, where folks can find your work, where they can reach out to you.
You can find me on Instagram at Galactic Warfighters, or on Twitch at Boat Cloak. Thank you.
Boat Cloak. Mm-hmm. Brien, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram also. It's Brien Aho Photography, and so all the few social media, obviously Facebook and stuff. And then I have a lot of my imagery on Photo Shelter, and I, you know, encourage people to reach out, and I think we all love critiquing and stuff. So we're here for you.
And Mickey, where can they find you?
MickeyStrand.com. And, you know, Mickey Strand at just about, you know, Instagram and all those things. I just found Mickey Strand and just snagged them all. My veteransportrait.com, it's got its own website now. It took over my website to the point where it actually needed its own website, so it became its own website. It's in the transition process right now. It's really hard to get into see World War II veterans, and of course they're leaving us really quick. So I am making a transition towards telling the story of the veteran returning from Vietnam, who wasn't brought home to a hero's welcome. And that's my next, you know, big portrait project, is to work on the veterans of Vietnam story. And so that's what I'm currently kind of transitioning over to. But MickeyStrand.com, veteransportrait.com, and Mickey Strand at whatever, you know, all those things.
Well, everyone, thanks for tuning into Depth of Field. We hope you enjoyed this show. You can find show notes for today's episode and links to everything we've talked about today, in addition to links to all the social media that we talked about today at aroundthelens.com. This is Bennie Davis. You can find me at nikon.warrior on Instagram, or Bennie J. Davis III on Facebook, if you'd like to reach out. It's been a pleasure to be with you here tonight, and we hope you we hope that we could provide a little bit of insight and understanding to what it's like for a visual journalist from the military, transitioning outside of the military. So thanks for tuning in.